He was always the favorite until my parents' cruelty at my wedding exposed the family secret they tried to hide. They say a wedding day is supposed to be the happiest day of your life. For me, it was the final fracture, the point where the illusion fully shattered. 10 months ago, I stood under an archway of white blooms in a fairy tale setting, my gown trailing behind me like a dream stitched from hope. Guests smiled, cameras flashed, and soft music drifted on the breeze. But in every photo, two faces were conspicuously absent, my parents and my younger brother, Michael. I wish I could say their absence shocked me. It didn't. What surprised me was how unsurprised I was, how quietly the betrayal settled in my chest like old dust finally stirred. Michael has always been the sun around which my parents revolved, and I, a pale moon orbiting in his shadow. Golden child doesn't quite cover it, he was their myth, their masterpiece. From the moment he kicked in the womb, he became the center of every conversation, the subject of every praise, the reason behind every toast. Elementary school spelling bees? Trophies lined our walls. High school? Student council president, valedictorian, homecoming king. He played varsity tennis but still chose theater over sports, because of course he did, and of course he excelled at that too. Later, he pivoted to marketing, where he now reigns as a 28-year-old VP with a corner office and a leased luxury car. I know all this because my parents recite it like gospel at every family gathering. It's their favorite sermon. I remember, painfully, the party they threw when he booked a regional toothpaste commercial. A commercial. There were monogrammed champagne flutes, a private chef, and a rented photo booth. They printed out his headshot and hung it above the fireplace like it was sacred. It's still there, slightly faded but lovingly dusted every morning by my mother like a shrine to promise fulfilled. In contrast, the day I graduated with honors in nursing after years of late-night studying and 12-hour clinical shifts, my parents nodded vaguely and returned to discussing Michael's next audition. It's hard not to carry those memories like bruises. Growing up, my father had an uncanny talent for identifying and critiquing every soft curve on my body. He pinched the flesh on my arms, weigh me with his eyes. "You'd look like your brother if you just had a little more discipline," he used to say. I was 11 the first time he enrolled me in a weight loss camp. 11. I learned young how to smile through humiliation, to laugh off the hurt before it could show. Therapy helped. Eventually. Enough to recognize the difference between seeking love and chasing ghosts. Enough to stop measuring my worth in my parents' glances. Enough to stop auditioning for a role I was never going to get. I tried though. God, I tried. Took the classes they recommended. Joined the extracurriculars they thought might make me more presentable. I even tried theater for a semester, thinking maybe if I mimicked Michael, I'd become lovable by association. I bombed. He never let me forget it. By my late 20s, I stopped trying. Stopped performing. I built something of my own instead, a career in nursing that brought real meaning, real human connection. I sat with people in their final moments. I watched them take their last breaths and held their hands when no one else would. There's a quiet dignity in that kind of work. But it wasn't the kind of thing my parents bragged about at brunch. So I crafted a life outside of their orbit. I kept interactions polite, distant, easy. They didn't notice the shift or they didn't care. They had Michael after all. Their son. Then I met him. It was at a hospital fundraiser, of all places. A mutual friend introduced us by the dessert table. He laughed at something I said, really laughed, and didn't once glance at my body like it was a problem to be solved. He didn't offer advice on how to improve myself. He just listened. He saw me. Not the version I edited for approval, not the sister of Michael, not the could-be girl. Just me. He loved my sharp tongue, my dark humor, my softness. He respected how fiercely I cared for strangers. And when he proposed 5 years later, it wasn't in a grand gesture. It was takeout on the couch, our favorite show playing in the background, a velvet box tucked into a napkin. It was real. Ours. That day, I thought maybe, just maybe, my parents would show up. I thought the idea of their daughter getting married might matter, at least enough for appearances. But no. Michael had a last-minute conflict and my parents stayed home to support him. Again. No apology. Not even a call. Standing beneath the canopy of white roses, surrounded by people who loved me for exactly who I was, I realized something. I had stopped waiting for them. And they hadn't even noticed I'd left. Of course I told them. You tell your parents when you get engaged, it's practically muscle memory. But looking back, their reaction should have sounded every internal alarm. No congratulations, no light in their voices. Just silence so thick it sucked the joy from the room. My mother finally broke it, her tone brittle. "Are you sure you're not rushing things, James?" Then, almost as an afterthought, "You might want to tone up a bit before the dress fittings." My father muttered something about weddings being expensive, then swiftly pivoted to Michael's latest vacation, Santorini, apparently. "Did you see the photos? Golden hour on the cliffs." He smiled like it was Michael getting married. At our engagement party, I tried to dismiss their odd behavior, chalk it up to social discomfort or generational awkwardness. But my husband saw it clearly. They spent most of the night huddled in a corner, faces illuminated by my mother's phone screen, ignoring guests, avoiding conversation. They didn't speak to his parents. They barely looked at me. Later, in the quiet of our kitchen, he told me he'd overheard their phone call. Michael was on the other end, angry, hurt. Their voices were low but sharp. This wasn't the plan. She wasn't supposed to go first. Don't worry, Michael. We'll make it right. I confronted them the next day, still giving them the benefit of the doubt. My mother laughed, a brittle little sound. Oh, we were just filling Michael in on family news, she said, waving the conversation away like dust from her sleeve. Then came the planning. Red flags unfurled like banners in a slow parade. My mother had curated multiple Pinterest boards for Michael's future wedding. He wasn't even dating anyone seriously, but she didn't offer a single suggestion for mine. No excitement. No input. When I found my dress, an understated A-line gown with delicate beading and a silhouette that made me feel, maybe for the first time, beautiful, her only comment was, "It's practical and flattering for your figure." I planned most of the wedding hand in hand with my mother-in-law, who treated me with a quiet, unwavering warmth. She came to fittings, reviewed menus, sent late-night texts when I panicked about guest counts and table layouts. She held my hand when I crumbled in the middle of a bakery 2 weeks before the big day, tears smudging my makeup tester as I whispered, "Why doesn't she care?" Every detail mattered to me. So I made sure the invitations went out properly, both digitally and by mail. I triple-checked the guest list with my husband. My parents received theirs. I saw the read receipt on the EV. I addressed the paper invitation by hand, tucking it into an envelope with trembling fingers. And when no RSVP came, I called. I texted. I emailed. They were very busy. They had to check the calendar. They'd get back to me. They never did. Eventually, I stopped asking. I couldn't afford the emotional hemorrhage. My in-laws wrapped me in kindness, covering every gap. My husband's sister threw a beautiful bridal shower, lavender and champagne, soft music, laughter that felt real. No one asked about my family. But their eyes did. The pity stung more than the rejection. And then the day arrived. A botanical garden ceremony in the golden morning light. A breeze that carried music through the air like a blessing. I remember standing there, surrounded by people who loved us, who showed up. Everyone said we looked radiant, in love, unbreakable. But I saw the empty front row seats. I saw the space where my parents should have been. During the father-daughter dance, my father-in-law stood, gently took my hand and smiled. He moved stiffly, carefully, as though afraid to overstep. He held me like I might break. I was grateful. I was devastated. That night, in the quiet hush of our hotel room, I collapsed into my husband's arms and let it all bleed out. All the years of not being chosen, not being seen. All the weight of invisible grief that I'd carried under my wedding dress. After our honeymoon, I reached out one last time. Not in anger. Just in need. They finally picked up. My mother's voice came sharp and wounded. "We never received an invitation," she said, before launching into a tirade so rehearsed it felt like a defense lawyer's closing argument. "I dreamed of helping plan your wedding. I can't believe you excluded us. After everything we've done, how careless." My father, as always, followed her lead. "We were waiting by the mailbox for weeks, James. We thought you changed your mind." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I wanted to scream. To remind them of the emails, the texts, the messages left unanswered. I wanted to say, "You never even tried." But instead, I listened. And for the first time, I understood that they had rewritten the story in their own minds, cast themselves as the wounded heroes in a drama they barely attended. I was stunned but not surprised. During the call, I quietly opened our wedding planning spreadsheet. There it was, plain as daylight. Their names, the date the invitations were sent, and even delivery confirmations for both digital and paper invites. Evidence undeniable. They had received them. Still, I didn't challenge their revisionist tale. I didn't call it gaslighting, didn't accuse, didn't demand accountability. I apologized, out of habit more than belief, and ended the call with a soft, "Maybe there was a mix-up." The familiar knot twisted in my stomach, a bitter muscle memory of being made to feel unreasonable, overreactive, invisible. Later, over tea, my husband gently unpacked everything he hadn't said before. The subtle winces, the stilted conversations, the sheer disbelief on their faces when we first announced our engagement. How his parents had cheered, and mine had frozen, like someone had just dropped a glass. "They weren't happy," he said simply. "They were horrified." He hadn't wanted to pile on during the planning. But now, in retrospect, it was painfully clear. They had spent the entire year preparing themselves for the wrong child's wedding. My engagement wasn't a joy, it was an interruption. An offense. All the signs were there. if I'd been willing to read them. And in that clarity, a truth I'd resisted for decades finally settled over me. Not like a storm, but like a fog that had always been there. I was never going to measure up to Michael. Not on any scale that mattered to them. Not as a daughter. Not as a person. Even my wedding, supposed to mark the beginning of a new chapter, had simply become another stage for their curated mythology of the perfect family, with Michael eternally at the center. Recently, I heard from my aunt, I'm not in the family group chats anymore, naturally, that Michael is engaged now. They've been dating for barely a year, and my parents are already moving heaven and earth for his wedding. They're practically vibrating with anticipation, posting breathless updates about luxury venues and couture fittings, sourcing exotic flowers and flying in a celebrity chef to cater the reception. My mother is giddy, apparently, taking Michael to private fittings at exclusive ateliers, fussing over table settings, relishing the mother-son bonding she never offered me. Not once. And yet, something shifted. The narrative they've tried so hard to control is slipping through their fingers. Several extended family members have declined Michael's engagement party. Some are skipping the wedding altogether. One cousin wrote me a message that began simply, I saw what happened. It was disgraceful. Apparently, my parents' absence at my wedding didn't go unnoticed. It was whispered about, then spoken aloud. Spread. Their cruelty became part of the family record, not because I announced it with a megaphone, but because silence echoes louder when it falls in a place of joy. When people ask me why my parents didn't come, I don't dramatize. I tell the truth. Calmly. Plainly. They couldn't handle me getting married before Michael. That's it. No venom. Just fact. Now, my parents are furious. They called again last week. Together this time, united in self-righteous indignation. My mother's voice was sharp, clipped with fury. My father's simmered beneath. You're sabotaging your brother's wedding, James, she accused. Relatives are refusing to come because of you. We've heard what you're telling people. You're poisoning them with lies out of jealousy. Jealousy. That word hung in the air like a slap. They demanded I correct the narrative before any more damage could be done. We are this close to disinviting half the family because of your gossip, my father snapped. Fix it. But here's the thing. I haven't said anything untrue. I didn't orchestrate some takedown. I didn't twist arms or spread rumors. I just stopped protecting them from the consequences of their actions. If the truth reflects poorly on them, perhaps the mirror isn't to blame. I've spent years pretending their indifference didn't hurt, cushioning their emotional absences with rationalizations. But this chapter has stripped all illusion. It's not their absence from my wedding that wounds the most. It's the realization that I never truly had them to begin with. That the kind of love I hoped for, the kind where your parents champion your happiness, where they show up for you not out of obligation but because it matters to them, was never mine. These days, I'm learning to let go of the fantasy. I'm building a life with someone who sees me, who loves me not for potential or proximity to someone else's spotlight, but for exactly who I am. There is a freedom in that, slow and quiet and real. If anything changes, I'll let you know. But for now, I'm done waiting for an apology that will never come. It's been 2 weeks since my last post, and in that short time, everything shifted. After sitting with your messages, your support, your insight, I did something I'd been avoiding for most of my life. I confronted my parents. Not through filtered emails or vague texts, but directly, face to face. They had been sending messages again, accusations wrapped in passive-aggressive phrasing, panicked about their tarnished family reputation. The implication was always the same: you did this to us. So I called them. Not out of anger, but clarity. They answered immediately. And predictably, they launched into the script. That I was jealous. That I was manipulating the family against Michael. That I had stirred up drama to ruin his wedding. I didn't argue. I didn't try to prove them wrong. Instead, I said, you're right. That silenced them. But not in the way you think, I continued. I'm not jealous of Michael's career or his accolades or his looks. I'm jealous of the love, the safety, the support you gave him so effortlessly, the kind you never gave me. For a long moment, there was nothing but breathing on the line. Then my mother's voice broke through, sharp with disbelief. That's ridiculous. We always treated you the same. And something inside me, something long buried under years of trying to be easy, pleasing, tolerable, snapped clean. I spoke the truth, raw and unfiltered. I told them about birthdays where Michael's spelling bee ribbons eclipsed my own quiet achievements. How my college graduation dinner was canceled because Michael had a callback. How his prom tuxedo cost more than a semester of my textbooks. I reminded them that they missed my academic honor ceremony because Michael had a mild cold yet managed to get him to soccer practice the next morning, smiling from the sidelines. My dad tried to cut in, muttering that I was being dramatic. But I didn't stop. I told them about wedding planning, how they poured energy into planning Michael's imaginary celebration for years while ignoring the very real one I was organizing. I described the silence, the cold disinterest, the pain of walking down the aisle without them there, of seeing their seats empty, of watching my mother-in-law step into the space where my own mother should have been. I talked about the pity in people's eyes. How I'd lied to my friends, pretending you were sick, pretending it wasn't personal, pretending I was fine. They didn't apologize. They didn't even acknowledge it. Instead, my mother's voice, incredulous, "If you felt that way, why didn't you ever say anything?" As if I hadn't. As if every whispered protest, every tearful confession over the years hadn't been dismissed as me being too sensitive. As if she hadn't rolled her eyes and accused me of making everything about myself each time I tried to speak. My father chimed in, his voice brittle. "It's not fair to slander us to the family. You're poisoning relationships that took decades to build out of spite." Then came the final blow. My mother, cold and measured, "We never thought you'd go so far as to sabotage your brother's wedding. But we always knew you were insecure about his success. This isn't how we raised you." That was it. The final crack in the glass. Even now, even in a conversation that should have been about the wound they inflicted, they were still centering Michael, his event, his image, his pain. Not mine. They didn't hear me. They never had. I could have shouted through a megaphone and they still would have only listened for Michael's name. So I gave them what I should have given them years ago. "You're right about one thing," I said quietly. "You did raise me. You raised me to believe I'd never be enough. That Michael's wins would always matter more than mine. That your picture-perfect family image was more important than my feelings. But you also taught me something you never meant to, that I deserve more than this." There was a long silence, then my father responded, his voice like ice under pressure. "Maybe it's time we stop pretending we were bad parents," he said. "Since that's what you've decided. Since you clearly enjoy watching us suffer. We thought you'd help fix this. But obviously you've made your choice." Then my mother, delivering the final cut like a practiced line. "Maybe you just couldn't stand not being the center of attention. We tried to treat you both fairly, James. But if you chose to play the victim, that's not our fault." And just like that, the line went cold. But something inside me didn't break this time. Something strengthened. Because this time I didn't walk away blaming myself. This time I knew finally that their inability to love me properly had never been a reflection of my worth. It was a reflection of theirs. I didn't argue. There was no reason to. They had confirmed, in their own words, everything I'd known but struggled for so long to believe. They would never take responsibility, not now, not ever. Even in what might have been our final conversation, they clung to denial like a lifeline. So I said goodbye. And hung up. Strangely, I didn't feel shattered. The tears came, yes, but not the aching, breathless sobs of my younger self. These were quiet tears. Cleansing ones. They carried no hope, no longing, only release. I had finally said everything. Every wound spoken aloud. Every memory placed where it belonged. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for having feelings, for wanting more than I was given. Later that evening, I sat on the balcony, legs curled beneath me, watching the sun slip beneath the skyline in bruised pinks and gold. The air was still, but something inside me had shifted. My husband found me there. He didn't speak at first. Just sat beside me and took my hand, the weight and warmth of it grounding me. After a while, I whispered, "They're never going to change, are they?" "No," he said gently, his fingers curling around mine. "But you have. That's what matters." He was right. The version of me that begged for validation, that measured her worth in approval she'd never receive, that girl is gone. In her place is someone who understands the quiet dignity of walking away from what hurts, even if it once held the shape of home. It still aches, accepting that my parents will never become the people I needed them to be. But that ache is duller now, less consuming. It's no longer the kind of pain that demands I keep trying. It's the kind that lets me go. For the first time, I truly don't care about Michael's wedding or the spectacle my parents are orchestrating to maintain their perfect narrative. I've spoken my truth. The rest is theirs to carry. And the strangest part? I feel lighter. As if I've been carrying a weight my whole life without realizing how heavy it was until now when it's finally gone. It's not the happy ending I once dreamed of. But maybe it's the ending I needed. The freedom to stop chasing love that should have always been mine. 3 days later, just when I thought the storm had passed, Michael decided to intervene. Of course he did. True to form, he crafted a message designed to wound while hiding behind a veneer of dignity. He's refined this tone over the years, a cocktail of superiority, moral high ground, and practiced concern. "What you said to Mom and Dad was completely inappropriate," he began. "They've supported us both through every stage of life. You can't just rewrite history because you're insecure about your own choices. He went on, every sentence dipped in condescension. I understand your wedding wasn't exactly what you envisioned, but that's no reason to sabotage mine. There's nothing wrong with celebrating success, especially when it's earned. Not everything is a competition, James. I didn't respond. I've spent too many years mistaking Michael's self-serving lectures for concern. Engagement only fuels him. So instead, I blocked his number without a word. I should have known that silence would provoke him more than any reply. A few hours later, I got a call from my husband. He could barely speak through his laughter. Apparently, Michael, thwarted by my lack of response, decided to go around me. He found my husband's personal number, likely through some shared acquaintance, and launched an unsolicited campaign to restore family unity. The first message was cloaked in formality. As James's brother and someone who deeply values our family's well-being, I felt compelled to reach out. But it didn't take long for the mask to slip. He informed my husband that, as the new man in my life, he had a responsibility to help me behave more appropriately. Yes, really? The text spiraled into patronizing absurdity. Family dynamics are complicated, he explained as if to a child. My husband, who holds a master's degree, manages teams, and has the patience of a monk, read the messages aloud to me between bouts of disbelief. Michael continued. Someone with James's sensitivity may not grasp the broader implications of her words. It would mean a lot if you could help her understand the long-term damage she's doing. My husband didn't reply. He didn't need to. He blocked him too. We laughed, but there was a bitter edge to it because beneath Michael's smug diplomacy was the same rot that had always been there, a belief that I was unstable, unreasonable, someone who needed managing. What Michael doesn't understand, what my parents will never understand, is that I'm not playing the victim. I'm walking away. Not to punish, but to protect. Myself. My peace. My future. And then came the real kicker. In one last flourish of arrogance, Michael tried to appeal to what he assumed were my husband's ambitions. A final, desperate lunge cloaked in condescension. Surely you understand that maintaining strong relationships with successful family members like myself could be beneficial to your future, he wrote. James's behavior is only damaging her own prospects, and by extension, yours. My husband nearly dropped his phone laughing. He really doesn't know me at all, does he? He said, shaking his head in disbelief. That was the moment I realized just how out of touch Michael truly is. Not just with my life, but with the people in it. He actually believed his corporate title and vague promises of connections would impress a man who's built his own life from the ground up, with zero interest in climbing someone else's ladder. That night, I came home to find my husband waiting for me, grinning like he just found a treasure trove of comedy. We scrolled through Michael's messages together, and instead of crying or getting angry, I laughed. Genuinely, there was something profoundly liberating about watching Michael's manipulation laid bare and seeing it fall flat, especially when aimed at someone completely immune to it. Because beneath the polished language and strategic tone, Michael is still that insecure teenager who can only feel important when someone else is beneath him. When direct pressure fails, he turns to triangulation, hoping someone else will rein me in on his behalf. He did this in high school, too. When he couldn't get under my skin directly, he'd whisper to my friends, casting shadows, twisting truths, always trying to tilt the room in his favor. Different decade, same tactics, but I'm not the same girl anymore. What once would have devastated me now just feels tired, transparent. 10 years ago, I would have spiraled. 5 years ago, I might have raged. Today, I'm just done. And my husband, bless him, responded with perfect precision. Thank you for your concern about James's well-being. As her husband, I'm focused on supporting her happiness, not managing her behavior. I think it's best if you direct any future concerns to James directly. Have a nice day. That calm, direct boundary was a masterstroke. No emotion, no openings. Michael didn't take it well. He fired off one last message, sour and smug. I see she's poisoned you against the family too. Don't say I didn't try to help when this all blows up in your faces. Help. He still sees himself as the victimized hero, betrayed by the very people he believes should orbit him. But this latest incident only confirmed what I already knew. He hasn't changed. He won't change. He still needs control, needs the spotlight, needs to rewrite the story until he's framed in soft light. And I'm cast as bitter, difficult, unstable. But here's the truth. His help did the opposite of what he intended. It didn't isolate me. It didn't wedge doubt into my marriage. It brought us closer. That night, my husband and I shared a bottle of wine and plotted a spontaneous weekend getaway. We laughed about Michael's tone-deaf attempt at manipulation. We toasted to peace, to boundaries, and to not caring what anyone named Michael thinks. And somewhere between dessert and plane tickets, I realized something that felt like resolution. Family isn't about shared blood or carefully managed reputations. It's about the people who sit beside you in the chaos and say, "I've got you." It's about building something rooted in trust, not expectation. For the first time, I'm truly at peace with keeping my distance. I don't need to attend Michael's wedding. I don't need to explain myself to anyone else. The performance is over. Let them have their ballroom and celebrity chefs and curated photos. Let them tell themselves whatever they need to. I'll be here, building a life that's real. They say success is the best revenge. But I've learned something better. Success isn't a spotlight or a title or a photo-perfect wedding with empty chairs. It's knowing who you are, choosing peace over performance, choosing love that asks for nothing but your presence, surrounding yourself with people who make you feel free, not smaller. By that measure, I've never felt more successful in my life. It's been 2 weeks since Michael's failed attempt to manipulate my husband, and the fallout has taken on a momentum of its own. Despite my parents' increasingly frantic efforts to salvage their image, the illusion they so carefully cultivated is beginning to collapse under its own weight. Through the grapevine, I've learned they've launched a full-blown PR campaign, one call, one cousin, one sob story at a time. They're contacting relatives individually, spinning the same tired narrative. That I'm bitter, jealous, and intent on destroying Michael's perfect wedding. The latest twist? That my bitterness stems from how modest my own wedding was compared to the lavish affair Michael is planning. Apparently, they're now claiming I deliberately sent their invitation to an old email and outdated address. Never mind that they've lived in the same house for over 25 years and haven't changed their email since dial-up. One cousin even confided that my parents produced a suspiciously fake email to support their story. But the timestamp was off, and several basic details didn't match up. Sloppy, rushed, and transparent. The best part? No one's buying it. Relatives I once thought were indifferent are stepping forward with their own stories. One uncle recalled how my mother hijacked his daughter's baptism reception to show everyone photos of Michael's high school theater performance. An aunt remembered my mother insisting Michael lead a toast at her own wedding reception. These weren't isolated incidents. This was a pattern, one the family had ignored for years under the guise of keeping the peace. But now, the tide has turned. Key family members, some who were supposed to play significant roles in Michael's upcoming wedding, have quietly pulled back. The exclusive venue my parents bragged about securing through a distant connection? Suddenly unavailable. A family friend who runs a high-end menswear boutique? Now booked solid through the season, unable to fulfill their custom wardrobe plans. And then came the tipping point. Last weekend, during a family gathering I didn't attend, someone casually asked to see photos from my wedding. That simple question apparently triggered my mother. According to multiple accounts, she launched into a breathless, unhinged monologue claiming I had changed since marrying, that I was tearing the family apart out of jealousy. She ranted about betrayal, about how I'd excluded them and how Michael's wedding was being ruined because of me. What she didn't know, my younger cousin had her phone recording. She sent me the clip. Watching my mother unravel, panicked, defensive, wildly transparent, was surreal. There was no mask left. Just the raw, unraveling truth of someone trying desperately to hold together a story that no longer worked. Ironically, their obsession with preserving the family facade is precisely what's destroying it. Every time they attempt to spin the story, they reveal more of their character. The more they push their version of events, the clearer the truth becomes. Even relatives who once stayed neutral are choosing sides. My father's own brother, who had always played Switzerland, called me last week. His voice was quiet, almost ashamed. I should have said something sooner, he admitted. I've seen how they treated you for years. I didn't think it was my place, but when they skipped your wedding, that was the last straw. Some things you can't excuse anymore. He and his family won't be attending any of Michael's wedding events. Not in protest. Just in quiet refusal to be complicit anymore. And the most satisfying part? I haven't had to do anything. I haven't sent mass texts or posted emotional rants. I haven't defended myself or asked anyone to take sides. The truth has done all the heavy lifting. My parents and Michael, in trying to control the narrative, have only confirmed what I've spent years struggling to articulate. The problem was never me. It was the system they built, one of favoritism, manipulation, and emotional performance. My husband said it best: they built a house of mirrors and tried to convince everyone it was a palace. But mirrors crack eventually. He's right. All it took was one person stepping off the stage for the entire production to fall apart. As for me, I've never been better. The constant need for approval is gone. The burden of managing Michael's fragile ego gone. I'm sleeping deeply, breathing easier, and investing in relationships that actually give something back. For the first time in my life, I'm not trying to hold together something that was never real to begin with. Sometimes, the most powerful form of revenge is silence. It's letting people expose themselves while you move forward in peace. And honestly, Reddit, you helped me find that strength. You gave me a voice when I felt voiceless. You reminded me that real family isn't about shared blood, it's about shared values. Support, integrity. And I'm finally building that family piece by piece.